Welcome to the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Gospore, a health and science reporter. Join me as we cover advancements being made in health informatics and explainable AI for students, researchers, and healthcare practitioners interested in applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. This podcast is produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory at the University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences Department of Health Information Management. Headed by Ahmed Tafdi, Pitt's HexAI lab cultivates extramural collaborations with academic institutions both nationally and internationally through its research, educational contributions, and this podcast series. Today, we're going to be speaking with Janetta Tabakov, who is the enterprise growth lead focusing on AI in biotech and biopharma at Perplexity. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk. And to kick things off, I would love to find out, what is Perplexity and what do y'all do?
Yeah, absolutely. Perplexity is an AI-powered search engine, or sometimes we like to call ourselves an AI answer engine. So Perplexity is, I like to think about it, made up of two components. The first is web search. So we have, since the very beginning, connected to the web. When you ask Perplexity a question, it finds the appropriate sources on the internet, and then it synthesizes those sources through a large language model, LLM, to generate a natural language response. So, in short, we're an answer engine that searches the internet in real time, finds sources, and generates high-quality answers.
What industries are using Perplexity right now? I mean, how is this being incorporated? I mean, a hospital is using this. Is it being incorporated into hospital systems, or getting a better idea of what industries might be using Perplexity?
I'm mindful that we're speaking about, universities and healthcare and life sciences on this podcast today, but really Perplexity is industry agnostic. So all kinds of industries, all sorts of people are using Perplexity today. We actually have 25 million users all over the world who are using Perplexity. Think of, if you were to go on the Google search and ask a question there, you would instead ask on Perplexity to, instead of giving you 10 blue links, to give you a synthesized answer with information that you're specifically looking for, rather than sources that you have to click into.
Okay. I'm curious, do you know if Pitt uses Perplexity?
I definitely know that there are students, at Pitt who are using Perplexity. Students are one of our largest users. So, if they're asking questions to better understand a particular subject that they're studying, to help them dive deep into certain homework problems, definitely students are using Perplexity today a lot.
Awesome. And I understand that you studied biology at the University of Minnesota, so you have a biology degree. And I'm curious, what you're doing with Perplexity is not completely far off, I imagine, from what your biology degree is. But, not a biologist, not necessarily a scientist. Curious how you got into the marketing side of biology.
I love that question. So you're right, I've always been interested in the life sciences, and I did get my bachelor's in biology. And while I was getting my master's it was in science, technology, and innovation management, so more on the business side of things, I was working at Google for a year, and I realized two things there. First, I wanted to move into biotech, and second, I wanted to work for a startup. And that's actually where my journey in the life sciences began. So first, I was at a bioinformatics company, and then later a cancer diagnostics company. And now today at Perplexity, I guess I've kind of made the full circle journey back into tech. But at Perplexity, I am focused on supporting our life science and healthcare customers.
All right. I'm curious, what interested you in biotech?
That's almost like an existential question. So I wanted to feel like the work that I was doing would be useful and valuable to people around me, and not just a bottom line for a giant corporation. So that's why I moved into biotech specifically, to feel fulfilled at my job, I would say.
No, I completely understand that. Before you were at Perplexity, you were at Arima Genomics. So you were an assistant director of marketing there. And so I'm always curious to different people's jobs in comparison about how your role at Arima Genomics is different or similar to what you're doing at Perplexity? Like, I love people's like career paths. I'm just very interested. So bear with me about how people get into the jobs they get into and their career path.
Yeah, well, at Arima, I was focused on supporting our marketing team as well as doing sales adjacent activities. So that is what I was doing at Arima. And while I was there, I would say that's when, ChatGPT took off and OpenAI released, GPT 3.5 and all of its models. And that was when I started using AI in my day-to-day work. So before this AI revolution, I had taken a course on Coursera on how to code in Python. And that was the extent of my programming knowledge. But then all of a sudden with AI, I started realizing, oh, I can actually ask AI how to code for me. And now I can write better emails or do a lot of more automated tasks through coding. And that's kind of how I started using Perplexity as well at my job, and kind of started sharing about AI and how AI is transforming my work with my colleagues at Arima Genomics. And it really resonated with them. They started using AI very extensively in their work, started using Perplexity to search. And that's kind of, how it transitioned eventually into a role at Perplexity, supporting life science users.
Thank you for that. And for your job and the work that Arima Genomics does, can you get a little bit more into what Arima Genomics also does? I think it's pretty cool from my understanding about the 3D structure of the genome, and that all sounds very cool, and also how they're using AI there. I don't want to get too off topic about Arima Genomics, but it just seems like a really cool way of using AI that maybe we can talk just a little bit further about.
Yeah, so Arima Genomics is a 3D genomics company. So they were a spinoff out of UC San Diego. And the technology that Arima has allows researchers to study the 3D structure of DNA within our cells. And it's not actually to see the 3D structure. It's a very computationally intensive process. It's called high-C sequencing that involves generating heat maps. And so that is what the Arima Genomics team does. I guess when I'm talking about the AI kind of work that we were doing at Arima, I'm really thinking about generative AI rather than the machine learning algorithms that are involved in analyzing a heat map, right? And finding the different ways that the 3D structure of the genome might be disrupted in a particular patient's cancer sample and so on.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And just building sort of on that and your work at Perplexity, just wanting to get a little bit more information, have a better understanding of how you support those folks in the healthcare professions and at the universities, the scientists at the universities at Perplexity, to sort of make artificial intelligence, if you will, more accessible, and making these tools more accessible to those folks.
Yeah, so my role at Perplexity involves helping our life science, healthcare, pharma users navigate Perplexity and use the AI search to accelerate their research. So at Perplexity, we're focused on providing AI tools that assist with research tasks across many domains, including the life sciences. But for example, our deep research feature represents a really great advancement in AI, and the way that deep research works is that Perplexity conducts in-depth analysis by performing dozens of searches, reading hundreds of sources, and reasoning through material to deliver comprehensive reports. And my goal at Perplexity is to help researchers leverage the capabilities of features like deep research to help accelerate their own workflows. For example, if they're analyzing publicly available medical research, doing healthcare policy research, and so on. So, knowledge is stored in many places, and Perplexity helps researchers find that information regardless of where it is.
And also too, on, I guess, that same kind of vein too, that have you found that there's maybe a particular question or research topic that some of your clients, will repeatedly ask, or if there's a commonality that you're finding amongst your clients or the people that you work with, especially in the life sciences? I'm just curious, if there's something in particular that a lot of folks are really interested in, like reasons behind that, why they would use Perplexity, like if there's a particular research topic or question, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That definitely makes sense. I would say that there isn't necessarily one particular topic that people are searching for. Like they're searching for information related to the domains that they're interested in. But I guess the maybe categories of searches that I see really resonate with people. One of them is, like research into a topic that you're broadly interested in. So imagine the typical workflow without Perplexity, without AI. Maybe you're going into PubMed, you're doing these very basic keyword searches. Certain publications come up, you maybe try to use the filters for recency or for citations to then find all of these papers and then start reading through the abstracts and so on to kind of come away with a general understanding of a particular topic that you're interested in. With Perplexity, that approach is really different. So you're essentially asking the AI to take those steps for you. You're like, okay, I'm interested in, say, type 2 diabetes. Tell me about the latest advancements in medical devices for type 2 diabetes, right? You ask that on Perplexity, you let deep research run for maybe, 15, 20 minutes, and it's going to come up with a report that includes hundreds of citations and sources that Perplexity is linking to allow you to dive in and go directly to those sources and search for or read through additional information.
Unlock the future of AI at Pitt HexAI. Pitt HexAI is where the brightest minds at the University of Pittsburgh come together to push the boundaries of artificial intelligence. Tune into the Pitt HexAI podcast to hear experts discuss cutting-edge AI research and its real-world impact. Join us at Pitt HexAI and listen to the podcast today.
Is there a different, just to be clear too, so we have students listening, people from all across the board, but is there a difference in the way that Perplexity works for academics versus another institution?
So we are working directly with academic institutions, such as Texas A&M. So students and faculty at Texas A&M will have access to Perplexity Enterprise, actually, and those are partnerships that our teams are working on. But there are also plenty of students who use Perplexity, like the free version of Perplexity, to do research and search without paying for an enterprise subscription. So yeah, there are definitely many ways of accessing Perplexity. I believe we ran this fun campaign where a certain amount, I think it was either 500 or 1,000 students had to register for Perplexity from a university, and then everybody got free Perplexity for a year. So there are different ways to access Perplexity as a student, and probably the first and most straightforward way is to just go to Perplexity and sign up for a free account.
One of the things I wanted just to take a step back that I ask a lot of the guests on our show, because I'm just very interested when it comes to AI, how you talk about your job, if at all, with your family, and how you explain your job to them.
That's a good question. Like, for example, talking to my grandma, right? Like, oh, what do you do at Perplexity? Like, what is Perplexity anyways? I think it goes back to understanding their level of knowledge around AI and then having the conversation based on that. So when I talk about Perplexity with my sister, who's like a big fan and uses AI all the time in her day-to-day life, it's different than the conversations that maybe even I'm having with my parents. But actually, I think one of the best ways to talk about my job with other people is, instead of explaining what I do, is to just show them what Perplexity does. I like to do that if I'm talking to, for example, my electrician. He's like, oh, yeah, like, what does Perplexity do? Like, explain that to me. I'm like, okay, well, let me show you. Let's ask a question. Okay, like, explain electricity to somebody that is not an electrician and doesn't really understand circuits or something like that. And then I show him the response, and the electrician is like, oh, wow, well, that's really cool. What else can I ask? And kind of the conversation goes from there.
All right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even as a journalist, my family asked me, what does a journalist actually do, and have to still explain what I do. So, and I feel like that's pretty straightforward. So yes, that's why I like asking people that question, just to hear how they, maybe some advice for me on how to be able to explain what I do a little bit better. And maybe I could ask Perplexity.
Let me show you. You can listen to my podcast.
But even that, it's like, what is the podcast still with my family members? And I'm like, radio waves. That's what's radio. But podcast is not. But I did want to ask too, can you explain the difference for folks? And as we're talking about what Perplexity is, talking about maybe what it's not, as in, how does Perplexity differ from a Chat GPT?
Yeah. So when Perplexity started, we have always been focused on going to the source. So we wanted from day one to build tools that empower users to access information seamlessly while also maintaining transparency. Because one of the challenges that we've seen with AI is they hallucinate, right? And you may not even know that they hallucinate because they give you this information so compellingly. And so Perplexity has been connected to web search since the very beginning, and we are really focused on building the best search experience for the user. So that's how I'd say we really differ from other chatbots. Nowadays, we continue to iterate on this as more companies are connecting to the web. We focus again on how to give users a better search experience, how to find sources, how to access more and more sources. And that is one layer of it. But the other thing that we realize at Perplexity is that people don't just go to the web to get their questions answered. There are a lot of other knowledge bases of information that people want to be able to tap into. So, for example, now Perplexity is not only connecting to the web when you ask a question, but now we're able to connect to Google Drive, OneDrive, SharePoint. So you can actually ask questions about internal files and do searches within internal files. We are also working with proprietary data providers. So today that is Crunchbase and FactSet. And in the future, we're working with textbook publishers as well, where if users have subscriptions to those proprietary data sources, they'll also be able to search those data sources on Perplexity as well. So ultimately, we want to be the place where all knowledge workers go to get their questions answered. And we know that that knowledge and that information is not stored in any one place.
I just want to be clear too, that would you consider Perplexity still a startup in this day and age?
Yeah, of course.
It's still a startup. Okay. I just want to make sure that if we use that terminology, that is actually how Perplexity would want to be referred to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny to think about, such a big company with such a high valuation being referred to as a startup, but I actually think that is what this kind of like AI boom has brought about, like companies that are rapidly growing, rapidly expanding, but they're still startups. Like Perplexity is less than 3 years old. And yeah.
What do you think, like, if you could attribute anything to Perplexity's success? I mean, because y'all did grow so quickly and were recognized so quickly, that what can you attribute to that growth and that popularity so quickly?
Ooh, good question. So I think a lot of it, well, definitely a lot of it was great timing and luck, first of all. But more importantly, or equally importantly, I'd also say a big thing is our team and our mission. So each person at Perplexity has relentless focus and drive. I have never worked at a company with such incredibly talented and driven people. So that's a really big thing. Like Perplexity would not be where it is today without the people who are working really hard every single day to make the product better and better. And I guess, speaking on the product, I would say that we're really focused on trustworthy, accurate, and user-centric search. And being really user-centric has allowed Perplexity to grow and become the really powerful tool that it is today. We build things that we know users want.
Well, and speaking of trust, I mean, how do you gain people's trust? I just feel like that there's still an obstacle to gaining people's trust, at least from my perspective as a journalist and trying to gain, media outlet trust and other journalists' trust. But maybe I'm wrong when it comes to other industries, or in your experience, how difficult or not difficult gaining people's trust is.
Well, that's a great question. And actually, I would say that is why Perplexity exists today, because people were asking like, okay, can I actually trust this information that AI is giving me? But the thing is, Perplexity has provided sources since day one. So you could just click on that little citation bubble and go directly to the source to find whether the information that Perplexity gave you is true. And so I think when users saw that, when they're like, oh, I can actually verify the accuracy of this AI generated answer, people were more and more willing to trust Perplexity. And like on the back end, our technology is built on sources and citing the information that is generated. So that definitely builds trust.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's really, I just want to emphasize, that point about the citations, and that people can go look up that information themselves by clicking on it and see if it's a trustworthy source to them.
Yeah. And now with, for example, like internal knowledge source as well, you might be able to say, oh, tell me about the roadmap for this project that I'm working on. And Perplexity will cite a source, but this will be like an internal document, for example. And again, you can click into that source and be like, oh, is this really what's on our roadmap? Well, let me look at the document. And then again, Perplexity leads you directly to the source.
And in closing, I just had one more question, and then I just wanted to make sure if you had any questions that you want me to ask you or any other information. But just as, big picture here about where you think, in 2025, what's going to happen with Perplexity.
I can't say anything, but I do like your question around what is the future of Perplexity? Like, where are we going to be in 5-10 years?
I mean, even just thinking like 1, 2, 3 years, things I think are ramping up really quickly. And, a lot seems to happen in a very short amount of time with Perplexity.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. Just like things that are on the roadmap for this year is already going to be mind-blowing to so many people. So one of the things that our team is super excited about is actually the Perplexity browser. And you'll be able to search on Perplexity through the browser. But more broadly, there's a lot of interest in AI agents. So not just asking Perplexity, tell me about what I can do on a weekend trip to New York City. Like, where should I stay? What should I do? But being able to say, okay, well, tell me about this trip and now book things for me, or, do things like that. So that I think is generally the future where AI is going more broadly, with AI agents and being able to execute certain tasks that you tell the AI to do. So maybe I can talk about kind of generally the Perplexity roadmap more broadly. So in the next year, Perplexity has a lot of really cool features that we're going to be releasing related to information search and related to the various places where information is stored. So for example, on the roadmap, we will be launching integrations with email and calendar. So you'll be able to ask Perplexity, oh, tell me about the emails that my professor from my anatomy class has sent. Like, what have I missed? Is there anything important? And oh, by the way, did the professor tell us that there's going to be a study session before the final? And things like that. You'll be able to ask that information on Perplexity. That's from a student perspective. Maybe for companies, that's also going to be interesting. around what kind of projects am I working on with this person, or how many meetings or what sort of meetings am I going to be on to talk about AI centers of excellence and so on, who's on my podcast interview list, and find information around who these people are and what they do. So you'll be able to do all of that with Perplexity. And again, we're connecting not just to the web and not just to your Google Drive and SharePoint files, eventually to your email and many other connectors in the future.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you telling me that, and that does sound exciting. And I just wanted to open up the floor in closing to see if there was anything else that you would like to add that maybe I didn't ask you. It's a very traditional journalism question, but I always find it helpful to ask in the end. So.
Ooh, well, I think it was a question that I was thinking through that I saw previously. And one of it was like, there are a lot of funding cuts and research funding is cut. Like, how can Perplexity help in a resource constrained world? And I actually think that AI is a great equalizer. And on a working level, Perplexity can serve as both like a force multiplier and an efficiency engine for researchers. So I would say this is pretty important because in today's funding constrained environment, tools like Perplexity enable researchers to accomplish more with less. For example, cutting literature review times from weeks to hours, automating some of that routine information gathering. And so I'd say that using Perplexity then allows teams to focus more limited resources on high value activities like experimental design, analysis, and so on. And ultimately, while Perplexity can't replace proper research funding, I would say that we can provide kind of an accessible bridge that helps important work continue despite financial challenges.
Thank you for that. That is a great way to close the episode. I'm glad that you brought that question back up. Thanks everyone for tuning in and for following the show. The Health Unexplainable AI podcast is produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health Unexplainable AI Research Laboratory at University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences Department of Health Information Management. I'm Jordan Gaspore. Thanks for listening.